Okay, picture this. It's 2026. After years of tension bubbling under the surface, the United States and Iran are in an open war. But this isn't a story about how it all kicked off. It's about how it might end. And believe it or not, the ending might be way more predictable than you'd think. So let's break down how that could happen. So the first phase of the war is a huge success for the U.S. military. Iran's navy? Wiped out. Their missile stockpiles? Seriously degraded. On paper, the job is done. But there's a big problem. The global economy is in a nosedive. And that puts the White House in a really tough spot. What's the next move? To really get why they're in this bind, we need to hit rewind for a second. This conflict didn't just appear out of thin air. Nope, it's actually the grand finale of a long-running strategy known as maximum pressure. Yeah, you can literally trace the breadcrumbs leading to this war. It all started back in 2018 when the U.S. backed out of the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Things got way more intense in 2020 with the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And then the final push came in 2025 with this new all-out effort to completely strangle the Iranian economy. And this memo right here really illustrates that final aggressive push. It's from a hypothetical second Trump administration in February 2025. And it's not subtle. It basically tells every U.S. agency to use every tool in the box, diplomatic, financial, you name it, to force Iran's oil exports down to zero. I mean, when you do that, a fight is pretty much inevitable. But all that military success came at a really steep price. As an analysis from the Cato Institute points out, the war caused oil prices to just skyrocket, jumping by around 50%. That's a massive blow to the global economy, and the U.S. economy too, which creates this incredible pressure back in D.C. to just end the war now. And that brings us right to the heart of the problem. The military objectives are met, but the economic costs are piling up. The administration is now at a major strategic crossroads. And the choice couldn't be more clear. Option 1, you double down, expand the war, and go for full-on regime change in Tehran. But that means putting boots on the ground, a long and messy occupation, and who knows how many lives and how much money that would cost. Or, option 2, you declare victory, take the wins you've got, and find a diplomatic way out to get the markets to calm down. So what would that kind of diplomatic off-ramp even look like? Well, the Cato Institute actually lays out a pretty detailed step-by-step plan for how to pull back from the edge. It's basically a three-step dance. First up, de-escalation. The U.S. publicly says, okay, regime change is off the table. In return, Iran recommits to its nuclear non-proliferation promises. Step 2 is mediation. You get neutral countries, maybe like India or Oman, to broker a deal to reopen vital shipping lanes. And in exchange, the U.S. eases up on the sanctions. And then finally, step 3, you start talking. Broader negotiations to try and build a more stable long-term security plan for the entire region. Of course, it's never that easy, right? Any peace deal is going to face huge hurdles. You've got powerful people who want the war to keep going, and you've got all these messy, unintended consequences from the fighting itself. And there are 3 big potential deal breakers, or spoilers. First, you've got allies like Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, who've wanted regime change for years. Second, there's the Iranian regime itself. They might think they have to fight even harder just to prove they can't be pushed around. And third, you have rogue commanders inside Iran, because the war has probably shattered their chain of command. Now, what this slide gets at is the incredible power imbalance here. The Cato Institute uses this great metaphor to describe the deep mistrust. I mean, think about it. From Tehran's point of view, trying to negotiate with the U.S. right after a devastating attack, that's not a negotiation. That's a gamble for their very survival. So they're going to be extremely careful. And even if they do get a deal, what happens then? An analysis from Lawfare brings up a fascinating point. With its regular military in shambles, Iran is almost certainly going to double down on the one weapon it has left that's cheap, resilient, and has a global reach. It's cyber forces. They're called the cockroaches of state power for a reason. They're just incredibly hard to get rid of. So winning the war could accidentally unleash a much bigger, more persistent cyber threat. So we've got the diplomatic roadmap and all the things that could go wrong, but what if we could actually predict the outcome using cold, hard data and game theory? Well, another analysis does exactly that, and it argues that the end of this war is almost a foregone conclusion. A report from a group called Lab 45 took a look at President Trump's past behavior in conflicts and negotiations and plugged it into a game theory model. And what comes out is a pretty concrete prediction for how this whole thing ends.
At the heart of their whole model is this concept they called the taco pattern. And no, not that kind of taco. It stands for Trump always capitulates eventually. It's a behavioral cycle they've identified where really tough maximalist demands get made, but then they're predictably dropped as soon as the economic pain hits a certain point. And that trigger point is usually a spike in the sovereign bond market, basically when the US government's own borrowing costs start to shoot up. That's a huge red flag for the economy.
So the model frames this whole conflict as a classic game of chicken, two cars racing towards each other. If both the US and Iran hold firm, it's a head-on collision, mutual catastrophe. If one side swerves, the other gets a big win. But what the model predicts is that because the economic cost of holding firm becomes too much for the US to bear, both sides will eventually swerve towards the only outcome that isn't a total disaster, a negotiated settlement. And they actually put a number on it. The model calculates a 68% probability that this war ends not in a surrender, not in a bigger conflict, but in a negotiated deal. The model also predicts it'll end surprisingly quickly. Once that economic trigger gets pulled, once the bond market starts to panic, the prediction is that the administration will look for the exit door within 30 to 90 days. And this, right here, is probably the most important number in the whole analysis. By 2026, after seeing this pattern play out over and over, the model says that Trump's threats just don't have any credibility left. The chance that he's a true hawk who will pay any economic price for victory is basically zero. His move is seen as a bluff, which makes backing down almost a certainty. So if you put all this together, you get a really fascinating picture. We have a detailed diplomatic path to peace, a serious warning about long-term cyber consequences, and a data-driven prediction that says an economic trigger will almost certainly lead to a quick, negotiated end to the war. Which kind of leaves us with one last big question. If the end of a war is this predictable, what does that really tell us about the reasons for starting it in the first place?